Welcome to another video, you guys. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the incredible duality between the Transformers and Pirates of the Caribbean series. Basically, this video is going to be about the major similarities that both of these franchises share. Yeah, I've had the idea for this video for a while, but the thing is, I was always just too lazy to make it because it required so much setup. But given some news that has come out about both series, I kind of figured, you know what, this is really my last opportunity to make this video, and it is a video worth making because there are just some incredible similarities between these two franchises. So sit back, relax, and I hope y'all enjoy. So we're going to start things off by comparing the posters for each of these movies 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, respectively. And the major theme when looking at these posters is look at the duality between Optimus Prime and Captain Jack Sparrow. Now, starting things off with movie 1, we have Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, and Transformers 1. Look at the structure for both of these posters, man. Extremely similar with the whole head in the sky thing going on. Look at where Optimus Prime and Jack Sparrow are placed. Dead center in the middle. Look where the villain is placed. Barbossa is to the right, Megatron is to the right, and you get your two supporting characters, major supporting characters, with Will and Elizabeth being on the left side, Bumblebee being on the left side. So yeah, extremely similar posters for movies 1 of both series. Now we move on to movie 2 of both series. We have Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest and Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. And these were both the main theatrical posters again for both movies. So the main poster again to promote both movies. And once again, very similar in structure. We have Jack Sparrow and Optimus Prime placed to the left of the poster. And then we have the supporting characters, Will and Elizabeth, on the right, and then Bumblebee on the right. So it carries over the exact same kind of structure in terms of this whole head in the sky thing from movie poster 1, except you remove the villain. So yeah, once again, movie 2 posters continue the same structure going forward. So then we move on to movie three's posters, and these again both the theatrical posters for both films, movie threes. And the initial thing you'll notice right off the bat is that both series sort of abandoned this whole sort of head in the sky poster design that movie posters 1 and 2 had. Both went for something a little different, and both ended up looking very similar. We have our main hero, Captain Jack Sparrow and Optimus Prime, in the center, both of them in sort of an action pose with their sword in their left hand. Then you have two supporting characters in both posters. You have Will and Elizabeth behind Jack in the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End poster, and then for the Dark of the Moon poster, you have Sam and Carly not behind Optimus because obviously Optimus is too big, but both in the poster. So both have a total of 3 people in the poster, with the main hero being the center. Both of them having the sword in the hand, both looking dead at the audience in the poster. So yeah, very similar in structure. These two once again different from movie posters 1 and 2, but both sort of wanted to do something different, and you ended up getting what you got here. Now, for this next comparison, this is the one with the least amount of significance, but still felt to conclude it because it is there. These are the posters for movies 4 of both series. Now, the one for Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides is the main theatrical poster. The one for Transformers Age of Extinction is the teaser poster. Both posters are the exact same thing regarding showing the exact amount of our hero cutting out and that mid leg section below the knees. Different poses for both of them, but still very similar in terms of the way they're looking off into the distance, not looking at the camera. Same amount of body proportion shown. Not a huge amount of significance, but it is there. And the final comparison for movie posters comes from movie 5 of both series, Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Men Tell No Tales and Transformers The Last Night. Now, both of these posters are not the main theatrical poster. These were alternate promotional posters for both films, but look at the structure for both of these posters. I'm like, God damn, they were thinking the exact same thing with these posters. Because look at the structure. You got the main hero at the top, sword over their shoulder. Then look where the main villain is placed right below them on the right side. Then you got your other major franchise star a little lower down with Barbossa there. And then you get Bumblebee. Then you get sort of your major side characters or supporting characters below them with Henry and Karina for Pirates. Then you got the human cast from Transformers. So these structure for these posters, very, very similar. None were for the theatrical poster, but still for what it is, very similar and very shocking in how similar they are. So that does it for the poster comparison for the 5 movies. And you may be thinking, wow, that's as good as it's going to get right there. But no, it's going to get even better because now I'm going to go into the story and box office similarities for each of the 5 movies. So sit back because it starts off a little weak, but it's going to get better, more similar as we go through each movie. So, starting off with the similarities between Curse of the Black Pearl and Transformers 1, both movies' plots are centered on a quest to find something, an object. Curse of the Black Pearl is about the quest to find the Aztec gold so Barbossa and his crew can become uncursed. And Transformers 1 is based on finding the cube in order to stop Megatron's plans for taking over the Earth and stuff like that. Then you get to the end of both movies. Both movies' main villains die in a chest related incident. Barbossa shot through the chest by Jack, and Megatron gets the cube ran up through his chest by Sam. And then for the box office for both of these movies were unexpected hits, unexpected smash hits. Both did roughly about the same amount domestically, a little over 300 million for both of them. And then worldwide, both did in the same range, 650 million for Pirates, and then a little over 700 million for Transformers 1. So yeah, both of these franchises got off the gate hot. They were warmly receptive box office hits and were the start of brand new smash hit franchises. So now we come to movie two of both franchises, Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, and then Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. And for both of these movies' main plots, the villain comes back following their death in the previous movie. Granted, they both come back at very different points in their movies. Barbossa comes back at the end of Dead Man's Chest, and Megatron comes back in the middle of Revenge of the Fallen. And then in contrast to that, you have a movie where both of our main heroes die. Jack Sparrow dies at the end of Dead Man's Chest, and Optimus Prime dies at in the middle of Revenge of the Fallen. So, granted, very different points of the movie, but granted, both still die nonetheless. And now for the box office for both of these two. Now remember, both did around 300 million for their first movie domestically, and those were smash hits. And then for the second movie, both did over 400 million. And when you can do over 400 million, that's when you know you got a smash hit franchise on your hand. Pirates did 423 million domestically, and Transformers did 402 million. So yeah, both of these franchises right here reached the peak of their popularity, and when they reached the status as mega franchises. Now, granted, at this point, Pirates had more worldwide appeal because it hit that 1 billion mark, where Transformers did 836 million, but still, both at this point were mega franchises, no doubt. Now, with movie three is where the plot and structure similarities start to get really strong. See, with movie three of both franchises, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End and Transformers Dark of the Moon, at this point in Hollywood, the trend wasn't to do a cinematic universe because those didn't exist yet. The trend was to do a trilogy, like Lord of the Rings, The Matrix tried to do that. A trilogy was the trend of things to do. And so, with both of these third movies, both were originally intended to be the end of both series, which is why both of them end up killing off almost all of their villains, or pretty much all their villains, and a lot of the supporting characters in each movies. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End killed the major antagonists with Davy Jones and Cutler Beckett, and then a lot of the side characters like Sao Fang, Norrington, Elizabeth's dad. And then on Transformers Dark of the Moon, you had your major Decepticons die, Sentinel Prime died, and Megatron died, and then all the other major Decepticons like Starscream, Soundwave, and Shockwave, they all got the boot, along with a few other Autobots like Ironhide. He was the notable Autobot that died in Dark of the Moon. And that helped to create that sort of feeling of epicness or sort of a finale. And combined with that, both of these movies, third movies, end up having the longest and biggest final battle of both series. In Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, you had the Maelstrom battle that took place in the sea between the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman. Epic battle. And then on Transformers Dark of the Moon, you had the Chicago battle. And both are regarded as sort of the best final battles of the series because they are long, they are epic, feature some spectacular effects, and they are really just amazing and sort of breathtaking to watch. And really do give you that feeling of epicness with how big they are. And because they were so big, you did get the feeling like, wow, this was sort of the end of the series right here. And then for the end of both movies, both of them ended in a way where they were sort of closed off. There were no sort of loose ends. Both had sort of closed endings. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End ended with Jack, happily going on another adventure. Will and Elizabeth's story seemed to seemingly wrap up. And then Dark of the Moon, the war was done with the Decepticons. All the major ones had died, and Optimus and the other Autobots had accepted Earth as their new home. So yeah, both originally intended to be the end of the series, but as we know, things didn't quite go that way. And both series did not stop because of the box office for both of these respective movies. Now, it should be noted that both of these movies saw a dip domestically for movie two's total. Both movie twos for each franchise did over 400 million. I think you see that dip with the domestic for these two is because movie two for both series was not as well recepted as movie one. So naturally, you're going to see a little bit of sliding returns. Both ended up still doing really well. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End did 309 million. Transformers Dark of the Moon had 352 million. Should be noted that Dark of the Moon had 3D at this point to help its total out. Still ended up doing really well, both of them. I think a major factor in that World's End box office dip was the fact that it was a really long movie, so naturally you could not have as many showings, but both still ended up doing well. And you look at the worldwide totals for each, Pirates did 963 million and ended up being the highest grossing worldwide movie of that year, 2007. And Dark of the Moon, this was the first $1 billion movie in the series, did $1.1 billion, and at its peak was actually the fourth highest grossing movie of all time ever. So yeah, both of these franchises may have saw a dip domestically, but still were still mega franchises because of that worldwide total. And that's why things continued on with their fourth movies. And for these movie fours, Pirates of the Caribbean, On Stranger Tides, and Transformers Age of Extinction, both of these movie fours wanted to do things a little different from the previous trilogy. See, coming off of the overarching story from the previous trilogy, both of these movie fours wanted to do things a little different when it came to the story and the characters that were in the movie regarding the cast. So for each of these movie fours, primarily you had this franchise's two main stars were the only main ones to come back. So for Pirates 4, you had Jack and Barbossa come back, and Transformers: Age of Extinction, you had Optimus and Bumblebee come back. And each of these franchises' two main stars were surrounded by a completely new cast, supporting characters and new villains. So for On Stranger Tides, you had new villains with Angelica and Blackbeard, and then for Age of Extinction, you had a new villain in Lockdown and Galvatron, as long as new Autobots, Hound, Drift, and Crosshairs, and all of the previous Autobots were pretty much gone. Now you had a few other minor supporting characters come back, like for Pirates, you had Gibbs come back, and for Age of Extinction, you had Ratchet come back for a little bit, but primarily, whole new cast surrounding our franchise's two main stars. And they both tried to add new elements to sort of spice things up. So for Pirates 4, you had mermaids. Age of Extinction obviously had the Dinobots heavily in the marketing, even though they weren't in the movie all that much, but still new elements to spice things up nonetheless. And in terms of the final result, each movie felt very different from the previous trilogy. Pirates 4 just in a bad way, didn't have that same sort of grand spectacle feel that Pirates 1 through 3 had, which is why I did not like Pirates 4. And Transformers Age of Extinction didn't have that same sort of pacing and storytelling that the previous Transformers films had, whether you think that's good or bad. Ended up feeling really different, despite the fact that it was still Michael Bay directing. Should be mentioned that Pirates 4 didn't have the same director come back for movies 1 through 3, which is why that one felt very different in a bad way. Now, in terms of box office, this is definitely the closest result in terms of comparison that we've had so far. See, remember, for movie 3, each did previously domestically over 300 million. Now, for movies 4, both saw a pretty sizable drop in terms of domestic box office. Pirates went down to 241 million, and Transformers went down to 245 million. It should be noted that both movie 4s were very poorly received by critics. So at this point, I think audience were getting sort of maybe a little bit of franchise fatigue, but you end up looking at the worldwide box office, and that is definitely what saved each of these movies, because Pirates ended up doing a little over 1 billion worldwide, so the second $1 billion movie in the franchise, and Transformers ended up doing 1.1 billion worldwide. So worldwide box office definitely helped both of these movies a lot. Each movie at this point had $2 billion movies in the series, so worldwide things were going really strong, even though the domestic box office was definitely taking a turn, and it seemed like audiences in the US were starting to turn on both franchises. So now coming to the comparison of both movie fives in each series, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and Transformers The Last Night. And there's a whole lot of interesting dynamics and symbolism with both of these movies. To start things off, before we start going into story stuff, both of these movies had a 10-year significance when it came to their release. Both released in 2017, and both had a significance when it came to 10 years. See, previously, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End came out in 2007, and that movie ended with an every 10 years sort of plot point with Will could only come on after becoming captain of the Flying Dutchman. He could only come on land once every 10 years to see Elizabeth before having to go back out to sea. And then Transformers The Last Night came out on the 10-year anniversary of Transformers 1. So the 10-year anniversary of the franchise. So big significance right there, the year 2017 for both of these movies. Now going into the story stuff or sort of elements, both of these movies, after the poor reception of the fourth film, both of these movies tried to get back to what the previous three movies were all about. That mainly involved bringing back the characters that were absent in movie four of each series. Pirates 5 saw the return of Will Turner. He came back at the beginning. Then you saw Will Elizabeth. She was back at the end. And then Jack's crew came back because they were absent in part 4. He was mainly on his own in part 4. And then Transformers The Last Night saw the return of Megatron, even though technically he was in Age of Extinction, though as Galvatron. He returned as Megatron in name. Then Major Lennox, the soldier guy from the previous three movies, or movies 1 through 3, he came back. And then for some robots, you had Barricade come back, Wheelie came back, and crazy ass Agent Simmons from movies 1 through 3. He came back, John Turturro's character. So that ended up helping sort of establish the feel of the previous three movies. And both of these movies' plots ended up being reminiscent of the plots of movie two of each series. Pirates 5 was about Jack trying to find the Triton in order to save himself from Salazar, a sort of ghost pirate that came back from revenge. That was similar to the plot of Dead Man's Chest, the second movie, in which Jack had to find the chest of Davy Jones to save himself for Davy Jones, who had come back because Jack owed a debt to him. Then for the plot of Transformers The Last Night, that was another sort of global spamming world quest to find another missing artifact. And the whole thing is that Optimus is largely absent from the middle of both of these movies. So the plots were very similar to the second movie in both franchises. And then for both of these movies ended up introducing major new female protagonists in response to the new age of female led blockbusters. See, coming off of the year 2015, that year was the year in which the new trend in Hollywood was to have blockbusters with females in leading roles. So stuff like, yeah, that year you had Mad Max Fury Road, which had Furiosa in the leading role. And then the big one that year was Star Wars The Force Awakens, in which Rey was introduced as our central new character in this new Star Wars saga. So both of these movie fives ended up going with that trend by introducing major new female characters. Pirates 5, you had Karina Smith, and Transformers The Last Night introduced two new ones, Vivian Wembley and Izzy. And for both of these movies, Isabella didn't end up playing that much of a big role, but for Karina Smith and Vivian, both ended up playing major roles. Both characters ended up being the most important character to that film story. Karina was the key to finding the Triton because she was sort of a woman who was studying stars, maps, was very smart, all that stuff. And in a twist, she ended up being the daughter of Barbossa. And then Vivian ended up being the key to finding the staff that the Decepticons were looking for, Quintessa's staff. Because in a twist, she ended up being a descendant of Merlin. So she had the clues from sort of her dad's passing ons and all that stuff. And both movies ended up having major post-credit scenes in order to tease a future sixth installment. Pirates 5, the post-credit scene was Will and Elizabeth sleeping, but then Davy Jones sort of apparently creeps into their room and leaves like a barnacle under there. Will wakes up but doesn't see him, so the Pirates 5 teases the return of Davy Jones. And then Transformers 5 had a mid-credit scene in which Quintessa ends up surviving and now has assumed a human form and is making plans to sort of kill Unicron. The major difference between these two is that Pirates 5 was marketed as the final installment of the Pirates series, but apparently they put this in this case they wanted to do something else because the director said they had plans for potential sixth movie, even though Pirates 5 was marketed as the last one. Transformers The Last Night was definitely not marketed as the final Transformers movie, just because they had been talking about a cinematic universe and all that stuff prior to this movie being released. So having a post-credit scene was not all that surprising. It goes to show you the changing of the times. Back when each movie's third movie was released, the trend in Hollywood was to do a trilogy, a closed trilogy. But now in the year 2017, cinematic universes were all the rage because of how well the Marvel Cinematic Universe had done, just been dominating for years. So both of these movies, I guess, tried to continue with that trend, having credit scenes to tease future six installments. Unfortunately for both of these two movies, this is where we get to the box office, and this is where things start to turn. Although we get a very similar, but at the same time, kind of a very different result for each of these two. For Trent, as we saw with movie four, for both of these series, the box office had went down to two in the 240s, and now things went even lower to below 200 million. Because Dead Men Tell No Tales went down to 172 million, and domestically, Transformers 5 went down to 130 million. So both of these movies definitely underperformed for what the studio had hoped, especially given the budget for both of these two. When the budget is over 200 million for them each, could not even recuperate that in the US. And once again, it should be noted that the reception for both of these movies was poor, the lowest rated on Rotten Tomatoes for each of these two. Although I don't think Pirates 5 deserved such a low score. I actually thought that was a decent little adventure, but nonetheless, still bad reviews for both of these two. And the audience had definitely started to turn on both of these franchises, especially at this point, given the fact that there were so many other blockbusters out there, like what Marvel was doing, some animated films that were out there, whole bunch of other stuff that I think people have finally gotten tired of both franchises. But you end up seeing the worldwide result, and this was the most drastic result difference for these two and for the series overall. Because Pirates 5 was definitely not a flop overall, ended up doing 794 million worldwide. So that is definitely not a flop by any means. Transformers The Last Night had a very drastic difference, about 200 different from Pirates 5, and about half of what Transformers Age of Extinction did, went down to 605 million. And that is definitely the more surprising results of this whole box office results we've looked at so far, just because of how much international audiences turned on the Transformers series, especially given how well Transformers The Age of Extinction did so well worldwide. And I think the main reason why is because Transformers The Last Night just did not have a whole lot of action to warrant sort of repeat viewings. It didn't have that same sort of explosive action that movies one through four did. So I think internationally, that's why people turn on it, because if you're not getting the explosive action in these movies, then you're just getting bad movies overall. But still, nonetheless, both of these movies saw a significant drop in terms of their box office domestically and worldwide, which is definitely the crossroads for the series and what led to things coming up. So both series were clearly at a crossroads following their movie 5, though it should be noted Pirates 5 doing almost 800 million worldwide. I mean, any other movie doing that kind of numbers, you would get a sequel greenlit like the day afterwards. That's a lot of money. But because it was such a drop off from the previous film, it was all like, okay, seen as kind of a disappointment. Whereas Transformers 5 was just a disappointment all around. Box office, critical reception, just no argument right there. But the thing is, the few months coming afterwards, things seemed business as usual for each franchise. The Bumblebee spinoff began production like a few weeks after Transformers 5 came out. And then there was news about Pirate 6 as recently as like mid 2018, where I saw an article about Pirate 6, how they're still going to do it. I was like, oh, okay, I guess things are sort of carrying on as planned. But things, of course, did not go according to plan because both series ended up being canceled slash rebooted. Pirates 5, a few months ago, was in December, that Disney announced that, you know what, we're hiring the Deadpool writers to reboot the series, and then a few weeks later, news came out that there would no longer be any Jack Sparrow. His time in these movies are done, and so once you get rid of Jack Sparrow, it's kind of like, okay, this is a reboot of the series, no question. And then for Transformers, following Bumblebee's theatrical run, news came out a few weeks ago that Bumblebee will be a reboot of the series, an official reboot, a new storytelling point. Because even though Bumblebee was a prequel to the series, because it had a whole bunch of elements, mainly Bumblebee's character, a few setups for Transformers 1, there was enough differences to where it's like, you know what, this could easily be a reboot of the series, sort of a stealth reboot. And sure enough, following the theatrical run, Hasbro decided, you know what, let's just go ahead and reboot this thing and start fresh. So there you go. Both series end up getting reboots. It should be noted real quick that a few weeks ago, the Deadpool writers actually ended up leaving the Pirates of the Caribbean reboot. So now Disney is trying to find new writers, but still, nonetheless, they're still trying to reboot the series. So yeah, both series pretty much are done in terms of that original continuity, movies 1 through 5. Although recently, both series did end up having one last moment of glory. Kingdom Hearts 3 recently came out, and Pirates of the Caribbean was featured as a world in that game, and it got heavily praised. The world was based on Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. It ended up being a really fun world. And then, of course, Bumblebee got released a few months ago, and originally it was preached and marketed as a prequel to the series. But like I said, there were enough differences to where they could sort of retcon and say, you know what, we're going to have this as a reboot. And sure enough, it is. So one last moment of glory for each series. So that does it for the comparison between both of these series. Yeah, just some incredible similarities when it comes to the plots, the structures, the posters, and the box office. Just some big time similarities between these two. And I will always be very appreciative to both of these series for entertaining me. I had a lot of fun with both of these franchises. Really, they're two of my favorite series of all time. I mean, those first three Pirates of the Caribbean, I absolutely love. Those movies were epic. Those are some of my favorite movies of all time. And then for Transformers, those movies just always had an element that just drew me in, man. I just loved the visuals, the robot designs, the action, Optimus and Bumblebee. They just had a lot of fun elements, even though the movies overall were not great. And I think both franchises deserve to be respected because they were the mega franchises in the short time before the Marvel Cinematic Universe really took over. These were the two dominant franchises out there. And in terms of the future, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's a lot easier to picture a Transformers reboot just because there's so many iterations of Transformers out there. Whereas Pirates of the Caribbean reboot, all we've seen are movies with Jack Sparrow. So it's going to be interesting to see sort of a reboot of that with no Jack Sparrow. Is it going to be set in that same universe, a completely new story? What's going to be that element to draw us in? That will be very interesting to see. But in the end, that does it for this video. I know it was a long one, but it was necessary because there was just a whole bunch of stuff to get through it. And if I had tried to rush through it, I would just be talking like a mile a minute, and that would not work. So I appreciate you guys sticking around, and thank you for watching.